Hey everyone, welcome back to the Baking Bootcamp. In this next lesson, we're going to talk about the muffin method. The majority of recipes that you will probably come across will use the muffin method. So first off, what is the muffin method? The muffin method is a really simple process. It's going to just be simply measuring out your dry ingredients first in one bowl, measuring all your liquid and wet ingredients in a second, and then simply combining the two. So sounds simple, right? But there's a few tips and secrets that I want to give to you in this video that I think are going to help always ensure that you have the best success with these types of recipes. So, first off, what tools are we going to use for the muffin method? Like the blended method, very simple, just a few more things that we're going to need. First, you're going to need 2 mixing bowls. You're going to use one for the dry ingredients and use a second one for the wet ingredients. I don't recommend ever using your stand mixer or hand mixer for the muffin method. Muffin method, when we get into it, is all about simple mixing, and your mixer is gonna just over mix it, I would say, every time. So stick to just using 2 mixing bowls and no mixers required. You also wanna just have on hand a whisk, some sort of spatula, of course, and one other thing that we haven't used yet, which is our sifter. If you don't have a sifter, you can get by but just using your whisk, but I always recommend with the muffin method to go ahead and sift your ingredients. We'll talk about why. First things first, you would want to go ahead and measure out your dry ingredients. And again, you would want to measure those and sift them. Easiest thing that I like to do is simply just place my sifter, I like this one here, just because I can set it right over my over my mixing bowl, and then just add my dry ingredients to it. So why do we sift? Sifting accomplishes 3 things for us. First, it's going to remove any type of lumps. Sifting is great for like powdered sugar. It's going to remove lumps. Cocoa powder, if that's in your recipe, it's going to help remove those lumps. It's also going to help to aerate your ingredients, and it's going to help combine them really well. Like your baking powder and your baking soda is going to make sure that it's evenly mixed throughout. So sifting, the big reason though, is that aeration. We want to incorporate some air into our recipe. And once things are easily aerated, we'll easily then mix our batter together. So when we are able to easily mix our batter, that means less stirring has to occur. Less stirring equals less gluten. And gluten, remember, is that protein network that the more that you mix your ingredients, the more that gluten is going to be formed. So if we stir less, we have less gluten. Gluten's great when we're making bread, where we want that gluten, that kind of tough texture, that chewiness that we love about a loaf of bread. But when it comes to muffins, we want them, of course, to be soft and tender, so we don't want a lot of gluten formed. So sifting will help to assure that we have less gluten formed in the end. Once you have your dry ingredients mixed, it would be then on to just simply mixing up your liquids. Any type of your fat, so whether it's melted butter or oil. You're also going to be most likely adding your sugar into. Because the sugar dissolves easily, a lot of bakers include sugar in with the liquid ingredients. And of course your eggs. Then it's on to just simply combining the two. And you would want to just add the wet ingredients to your dry ingredients and mix just until they come together. Let me say that one more time. Mix just until they come together. You do not want a smooth batter when it comes to the muffin method. In fact, lumps are exactly what we're going for. Those lumps will bake out, so don't worry. If you have a smooth batter, probably means you've overmixed. So I just wanted to show you what the batter should look like. As you can see here, there are still some lumps in this batter, and that's exactly what we want. As opposed to this batter, as you can see, just how smooth this one is. This one's been really overmixed, and there's actually some air bubbles that have already started to form and pop already inside this batter. So this one just shows you what it looks like when it's been overmixed. And what happens when you overmix your batter? You're going to create what are called tunnels or tunneling. Tunneling is basically large pockets of air that have resulted from that overmixing. And again, overmixing, lots of gluten, we're going to end up with probably a tough textured muffin or quick bread, whatever it is that we're making, and we'll get those big pockets of air. So if you've ever bit into a muffin and you've seen those kind of long, almost looks like a wormhole in the center of your muffin, that's due from over mixing.
So I have two different muffins here. The one on the left has been mixed properly, and you can see it has a nice even textured crumb, whereas the one on the right has these big open holes right here, and that's the tunneling that's been caused by the over mixing of your batter.
So let's cover a few last secrets and a little bit of tips to ensure that whenever we come across a recipe using the muffin method, we have 100% success every time. All right, a few last tips for you to master the muffin method before we get started on a recipe. Another great tip for you is always to make sure that your ingredients are room temperature, especially your eggs. So what I've done here, if you're like me, you never take things out ahead of time. So what I like to do to bring my eggs to room temperature quickly is just place them into a bowl of warm water. Warm, not hot, we're not trying to cook these eggs. And just let them sit in that bowl of warm water for 10 minutes and you'll have room temperature eggs ready to go. Another thing is always to check the freshness of your leavening agents. Muffins are really going to depend again on that baking powder and baking soda being able to do their thing. So go back in the other video and just remind yourselves how to do that. It's super easy and it's really going to help to make sure that your muffins, quick breads, or whatever it is you're making rise perfectly. And the big thing, of course, of the muffin method, do not overmix. I can't say that enough. Again, we're trying to make sure that we have less stirring happening, less gluten, and a nice tender baked good in the end. So you just want to stir just until it comes together and then walk away. Lumps are our friends when it comes to the muffin method. If you're ever adding berries, and what we're going to do in the next recipe video here is add chocolate chips, you always want to toss that with a little bit of flour or your dry ingredients first. Because they're heavier, they're going to tend to sink to the bottom. So if you've ever bitten into a blueberry muffin and all the blueberries were sitting sad at the bottom of the liner, that's because they weren't tossed in a little bit of flour. That's going to help keep them suspended in the batter and not sink on you in the end. And the last couple little things I have for you are a little bit of oven 101, which we haven't talked about. It's super important that you get to know your oven, get to know the hot spots where things kind of bake maybe a little bit hotter spots than others. Big thing is no peeking. Once they go into the oven, trust that timer. I always set it a couple minutes earlier than the recipe calls for, just because you can never rely too much on that time, but no peeking during. That's really going to kind of disturb the muffins while they're baking. Another big tip I have for you with your oven is to invest in an oven thermometer. You can preheat your oven to 350 degrees, but you have no way of actually knowing if it's actually registering at 350. I used to live in an apartment and I had a super old oven that I was using, and so I would set the oven to 350 degrees, but it wasn't until I started using an oven thermometer that I then realized that the oven actually was only at about 325 degrees. So I had to then adjust my temperature setting when I did that. So an oven thermometer is inexpensive and it's really going to help to yield better results. So those are a few of my little secrets to mastering the muffin method. So let's get started and let's bake something up using this method.